How did I find out, after all these years, that I wasn't the father of my own child? I always thought life had a strange way of balancing itself out. Some days were coded in routine, others in kind of chaos that left your hands trembling even hours later. The day it all began felt ordinary. Sunlight crawling lazily through the kitchen blinds, the sound of my son's laughter outside mixing with the faint smell of coffee my wife had just poured into my mug. Nothing warned me that within hours I would be staring into the abyss of my own blood, questioning everything I thought I knew. It happened fast. A scream, the sickening crunch of metal against pavement, and I was sprinting out the door before the cup of coffee even stopped steaming on the counter. My boy, my son, lay twisted beside his bike, his face pale, lips trembling as he whimpered my name. His leg was bent in a way that made my stomach turn. My wife was already crying, clutching him, begging me to call an ambulance. I'd never felt so powerless, watching strangers load him into the back of that white van with flashing lights. My wife's hand gripped mine the entire ride, nails digging deep, as if holding me could anchor her to some reality where everything would be fine. I wanted to believe her fear mirrored mine, that we were united in this. I didn't know then how fragile that bond really was. At the hospital, time blurred. The sterile smell, the mechanical beeping, the chaos of doctors shouting numbers and commands. It all pressed on me until the only thing I could focus on was the boy on the gurney. They said he'd lost too much blood. They needed a transfusion. I didn't hesitate. I stepped forward, offered my arm, demanded they take what they needed. My wife did the same. That's when the first seed of doubt was planted. The nurse, almost casually, mentioned his blood type. B positive. My wife froze for a fraction of a second. So brief, I thought I imagined it. She quickly smiled, told me everything was fine, that the important thing was he was stable now. I didn't think much of it in that moment. Relief drowned out the details. We were told he would recover, that the surgery went well, that in a few weeks he'd be back on his feet. I remember kissing my wife outside the hospital, the taste of salt from her tears mixing with the faint sweetness of her lips. We clung to each other as though our bodies could absorb the trauma and transform it into comfort. Later that night, when we were finally home, she pressed against me in the dark, her breathing heavy, her skin damp with leftover fear. Sex after fear always felt different, raw, urgent, almost violent in its need. She pulled me into her, as if she wanted to erase the day through sweat and thrusts, her nails biting into my back while she whispered my name. For that moment, I felt like the husband, the father, the protector. I didn't know yet that this was all built on a lie. The next day, with my son sleeping safely in the hospital bed, I tried to shake off the unease. But it lingered, a shadow just out of reach. That's why I found myself at the bar later that evening, surrounded by familiar laughter and the comforting haze of alcohol. My friends knew how to dull sharp edges. We drank to my boy's recovery, to family, to life. I laughed with them, retelling the story of the accident, the panic, the relief. It was only when I mentioned the blood transfusion that the room changed. My friend Daniel, a pediatrician, leaned forward, his expression tightening. "Wait, what blood type did they say he was?" he asked. "B positive." I answered without thinking, already lifted my glass for another drink. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel's eyes locked onto mine, serious, sharp. "But you and your wife are both O negative, right?" I laughed, confused. "Yeah, so what?" His voice dropped, calm but edged like a blade. "That's impossible. 2 O negative parents can't produce a child with B blood type, not under any circumstance." The words landed like a bullet in my chest. The others at the table shifted uncomfortably, staring into their glasses, wishing they hadn't heard. But I heard. I felt it lodge deep inside me, pulling apart everything I thought I knew. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "You're saying he's not?" Daniel nodded slowly, almost pitying. "I'm sorry, but biologically, he can't be your son." The world tilted. I sat there, staring at the condensation dripping down my glass, my mind screaming at me to deny it, to laugh it off. But I couldn't. My wife's brief hesitation at the hospital replayed in my head, that tiny flicker of fear, the way she'd rushed to reassure me before I could even think. I left the bar soon after, the laughter of my friends chasing me into the night like ghosts. Each step home was heavier than the last. The alcohol fueled my rage, but underneath it was something worse. Betrayal, humiliation, the sickening thought that the life I had built was a house of cards ready to collapse. When I opened the front door, the lights were low. My wife was sitting on the couch, still in her hospital clothes, her hair a mess, her eyes red from crying. She looked up at me with relief, with love, and all I could think was, who are you really? What have you done to me? When I closed the door behind me, the sound was sharper than usual, like a gunshot echoing through the quiet house. My wife looked up from the couch, her eyes wide and wet, her face pale from exhaustion. For a second, I almost believed nothing had changed, that she was still the woman who had clung to me in the hospital, still the woman who had kissed me with desperate passion in our bed last night. But the voice of my friend Daniel wouldn't let go. It's impossible. 2 O-negative parents can't have a B-positive child. I stood in the doorway, silent, staring at her. My chest felt tight, my hands trembling from more than just the alcohol. She rose slowly, searching my face. "You're scaring me," she whispered. "What happened?" I laughed, though it came out bitter and jagged. "What happened?" "That's a good question." I took a step closer, my words sharp. "You want to tell me how our son, ended up with a blood type that's biologically impossible?" Her lips parted, her body stiffening like I had slapped her. For a moment, she didn't speak, her eyes darting away, searching for an escape. Then she forced a weak smile. "Maybe the hospital made a mistake." "Don't!" My voice cut her off, louder than I intended. "Don't you dare feed me another lie." I could feel the blood pounding in my temples, anger boiling under my skin. "I talked to Daniel tonight. He's a doctor. He confirmed it. There's no mistake. So tell me, who the hell is he?" She shook her head rapidly, tears brimming. "No, it's not like that. Please, you're drunk, you're confused. Let's just talk about this tomorrow." But I couldn't stop now. I stepped closer until I was towering over her, my breath hot with whiskey. Tomorrow? After how many years of lies? After raising a child that isn't mine? My voice cracked, half fury, half heartbreak. "You let me believe he was my son, my flesh and blood. You watched me sacrifice for him, love him, protect him, and you never once told me the truth." Her tears spilled over, streaming down her face. She reached for me, placing her hand on my chest. "I never wanted to hurt you. I swear. I was scared, I thought." I grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to stop her. "You thought, what? That I'd never find out? That I'd just play the fool forever?" My voice was shaking. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to tear apart the illusion she had built around me. She tried to hold my gaze, but her eyes broke, darting down. "Yes," she admitted in a whisper, her shoulders collapsing. "I thought you'd never find out. I thought I could keep us together. I was stupid. I'm so sorry." The words hit me like a blade twisting in my gut. I wanted to hate her, to shove her away, but part of me couldn't. I still saw the woman I had loved for years, the mother of the boy who called me Dad. My rage wrestled with something darker, more complicated. I pulled her closer, so close her breath brushed against my face. "Do you even know what you've done to me?" I growled. "You've destroyed everything." And yet, even in that moment of raw betrayal, my body betrayed me. The closeness, the heat of her, the memory of last night's desperate sex. They all surged inside me. She felt it too. I knew she did, because her breathing grew heavier, her chest pressing against me as though she craved punishment and comfort at once. She whispered, trembling, "Please don't leave me." Her hand slid from my chest to my neck, fingers desperate and needy. The tears on her cheeks glistened in the dim light, and I hated that I still found her beautiful. I kissed her, hard, violent, full of anger. She gasped against my mouth, but she didn't pull away. Her hands clawed at my shirt, clinging to me like a drowning woman. Our bodies collided in confusion, fury mixing with desire. It wasn't love, not anymore. It was need, primal and twisted. I pressed her against the wall, my mouth moving down her throat, tasting the salt of her tears and sweat. She moaned, half in shame, half in longing. For a moment, I felt powerful, punishing her, reminding her that she was mine, even as the truth told me she had given herself to someone else once. When it ended, we were both breathless, trembling, leaning against each other like enemies locked in embrace. She buried her face in my chest, sobbing quietly. I held her, but my mind was already somewhere else, cold and calculating. "I'm not leaving," I said finally, my voice low and steady. "But don't mistake that for forgiveness." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with confusion. "What do you mean?" I cupped her face in my hand, brushing my thumb across her wet cheek. "I'll raise him as my son. I'll love him. But you, I paused, letting the silence sting. You'll live every single day knowing what you've done. You'll watch me love him while I give you nothing. That's your punishment. Her lips trembled. Please don't. I pulled away, stepping back, leaving her against the wall. You made this bed, I said. Now you'll sleep in it. I walked upstairs, leaving her crumpled on the floor. My chest was still burning, my hands still shaking, but my mind was clear. Revenge wasn't about leaving. It was about staying, and she was going to feel it every single day. The next morning felt heavier than any hangover I'd ever had. My head throbbed, my throat was dry, but it wasn't just the whiskey from the night before. It was the weight of everything I had said, everything I had learned. The bedroom was filled with silence, so thick it pressed against my ears. My wife lay beside me, curled on her side, her back turned. I could see the faint tremor in her shoulders, as though she hadn't slept at all. For a long moment, I just stared at her. In the dim light, she looked fragile, almost innocent, as if last night's confession had been a dream. But it wasn't. I could still hear her words echoing in my skull. I thought you'd never find out. I rolled out of bed quietly, leaving her in the sheets. Downstairs, the house smelled of stale coffee and fear. My son's toys were scattered across the floor from the day before, tiny reminders of the life I thought I had, the life I now realized was built on sand. When she finally came down, her eyes were swollen, her hair messy. She looked at me cautiously, like I might explode again at any second. I was calm, though too calm. That scared her more. I made some coffee, she said softly, her voice raw. I nodded, took the cup, sipped in silence. The bitterness spread across my tongue, grounding me. She sat across the table, her hands wrapped tightly around her own mug, waiting for me to speak. Finally, I set mine down and looked at her. He's still my son, I said evenly. Nothing changes that. I'll raise him. I'll protect him. He'll never know the truth. Her lips parted, relief flashing in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, tears threatening again. But don't misunderstand me. I leaned forward, my voice lowering. I'll never forgive you. Not for this. You'll live every day knowing I stayed not out of love for you, but in spite of you. Her relief vanished, replaced by a hollow ache. She nodded slowly, swallowing her words. She understood. The rest of the day was routine on the surface. We visited the hospital, sat by my son's bed, watched cartoons on a tiny screen above his head. I held his hand, stroked his hair, smiled when he smiled. Anyone watching would have thought we were the perfect family. But under the surface, everything had shifted. My wife's eyes never left me, as though she expected me to crumble, to lash out, to abandon them both at any moment. That night, after we got home, I stood at the window with a glass of whiskey, staring into the dark street. She came up behind me, hesitating, her hands twitching at her sides. I could feel her presence before she touched me. I don't know how to fix this, she said quietly. I took a sip, savoring the burn. You can't. She stepped closer, her body brushing mine. Please, she whispered, her breath warm against my neck. I'll do anything. Just don't shut me out. I turned then, meeting her eyes. There was desperation there, the same desperation I'd felt in her last night when we tore into each other with rage and lust. For a moment, my body remembered the heat of her skin, the way her nails had raked across my back. But I held on to the cold inside me, the revenge I'd chosen. I set my glass down and brushed a strand of hair from her face. She leaned into my touch like a starving woman, and then I pulled back. You'll never have me again, I said flatly. Her face crumpled, her lips trembling. She reached for me, but I stepped away, leaving her hand hanging in the air. She broke then, covering her face as sobs shook her shoulders. I watched her cry, a strange calm settling over me. This was the beginning. She would live in this prison of her own making, guilt, shame, and longing for a man who would never give her what she wanted. Later, when I lay in bed, I thought of my son. His small hand in mine, his trust, his laughter. He was innocent. None of this was his fault. My love for him was real, unshaken. That was what made this revenge even more perfect. She would see me love him every day, while she remained locked out of my heart forever. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I knew the game had only just begun. The hospital smelled less suffocating today. They finally told us we could bring him home. My son sat up in bed, his leg wrapped in bandages, his small face pale but glowing with excitement. He clutched the stuffed bear I brought him days before and kept asking, When can I sleep in my own bed, Dad? The way he said Dad filled me with something both painful and grounding. Whatever his blood said, I was his father. That was the one truth I clung to. My wife stood on the other side of the bed, her smile practiced, her eyes hollow. She looked at me every few seconds, like a criminal waiting for the judge's final word. But I didn't look back. My attention was fixed on the boy. When we carried him out, he held my hand tightly, his other arm around her neck. For anyone watching, we looked like the perfect family, united and strong after scare. No one could have guessed that between us ran a fault line, one crack away from tearing open. At home, the house felt strangely different. Familiar rooms now held unfamiliar shadows. The toys on the floor, the photos on the walls, even the kitchen where I had kissed her 1,000 times. It all looked like a stage set, carefully arranged to sell the illusion of a marriage. My son asked for cartoons, so I sat with him on the couch, ruffling his hair, laughing at the bright colors on the screen. He leaned against me, trusting, safe. I made sure my laughter was loud enough for her to hear from the kitchen, where she busied herself with dinner. Every sound of joy from me was a blade to her chest, and I wanted her to feel each cut. When dinner was ready, she called us softly. We sat at the table, my son chattering about his favorite shows and the hospital food he hated. I smiled, asked him questions, encouraged his stories. My wife barely spoke. She pushed food around her plate, her gaze flickering to me again and again, hoping for even a scrap of warmth. I gave her none. After he went to bed, the house fell silent. I poured myself a drink, sat in the armchair, and watched the ice melt in the glass. She lingered in the doorway, unsure whether to approach. Finally, she came closer, sitting across from me, her hands clasped tight. "I know I don't deserve anything from you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But I can't stand the silence. Please say something." I looked at her, my face a mask. "I already told you everything last night. I'll raise him. I'll love him. But you're finished." Her eyes filled, but she didn't argue. She simply nodded, as if each word was a chain tightening around her throat. She tried another tactic then, sliding from the chair to kneel at my side. Her hands touched my knees, her face tilted upward, desperate. "I'll do anything," she murmured. "Anything to make it right. Please, just don't hate me." I laughed, bitter and hollow. "Don't hate you? You destroyed me. You destroyed us. There's no fixing that." Her hands trembled on my legs. For a second, the memory of her skin under mine, the heat of her body, flashed across my mind. My chest tightened with a mix of anger and unwanted desire. But I pushed it down. Desire was her weapon. I wouldn't let her use it again. I stood, her hands slipping away. "Go to bed," I said coldly. "I'll finish my drink." She stayed on the floor for a long moment, then finally rose and walked upstairs, shoulders slumped. I listened to her footsteps, to the sound of the bedroom door closing, and felt something dark but steady settle inside me. This was how it would be now. She would watch me love our son, hear his laughter, see the bond we shared, and know she had no place in it. That was her prison. That was her punishment. When I finally went upstairs, she was curled on the far side of the bed, her body turned away, as though she didn't dare take up space. I lay down beside her without a word, staring at the ceiling. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it carried a single thought with it. The revenge had only just begun. Days slipped into a rhythm that looked ordinary from the outside, but felt poison within. My son was recovering quickly, hobbling around the house with his crutches, smiling when he managed a few steps without help. He filled the rooms with laughter, and I made sure I was always there beside him, holding his hand, encouraging him, celebrating his victories like a father should. And every time I kissed the top of his head, every time I said, "I'm proud of you, son," I could feel my wife watching from the edges of the room. Her eyes burned into me, pleading for the smallest scrap of acknowledgement. I gave her nothing. She tried. "God!" she tried. She hovered in the kitchen, cooking his favorite meals, fussing over his bandages, cleaning tirelessly. She was a ghost in her own house, haunting the periphery of our lives. At dinner, she asked me questions I ignored, tried to brush my hand under the table, only for me to withdraw as though her touch carried poison. The boy never noticed. He was too young, too wrapped in the comfort of having his parents near. But she noticed, and that was all I cared about. One evening, after putting him to bed, she followed me into the living room. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying, but she still had that stubborn fire, the one that once drew me to her. She stood behind the couch as I nursed a glass of whiskey, watching me like she was afraid to blink. "Do you hate me?" she asked finally, her voice cracking. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch until her breathing grew shaky. Then I turned my head, slightly. "I don't hate you. Hate would mean I still care. You're nothing to me now." Her knees buckled, and she gripped the back of the couch for support. Tears spilled freely, but she forced herself closer, leaning down, her lips grazing the back of my neck. The heat of her breath sent an involuntary shiver through me, a cruel reminder of the nights when that touch had meant safety, desire, love. She whispered, "I still love you. I still want you." Her hand slid over my shoulders, tentative, trembling, searching. For one dangerous second, I almost gave in. My body remembered her too well. The taste of her skin, the way she'd arch into me, the desperate cries of pleasure. But then I remembered the truth, the betrayal, the other man's blood in my son's veins. I shoved her hands off and stood abruptly. "Don't touch me." Her eyes widened, her lips trembling as she reached for me again. "Please don't do this. I'll do anything." I stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the anger radiating off me. "That's the problem. You already did everything, with someone else." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I left her there, shaking, and went upstairs. In bed that night, I lay awake while she lay rigid beside me, our bodies separated by miles of silence, though only inches apart. I knew she was crying softly into her pillow, and part of me savored it. This was her punishment. To share my house, my bed, my life, but never again my heart. The next morning, I made breakfast for my son, while she lingered awkwardly in the doorway. He laughed when I flipped pancakes onto his plate, syrup dripping down his chin as he ate. I cleaned him up, kissed his forehead, and sent him off to watch cartoons. She tried to join in, but he brushed her off, too wrapped up in the glow of my attention. I saw the pain flash across her face. She realized in what I already knew, that the bond between me and the boy was unbreakable, stronger than blood, stronger than betrayal. And every day that bond grew, the more she became a stranger in her own family. Later, while she folded laundry upstairs, I stood in the doorway watching her. She felt my gaze and turned, her breath catching. For a moment, I let my eyes travel over her body, the curve of her waist, the shape of her thighs, the memory of her skin under mine. Desire twisted inside me, dark and bitter, but I kept my face cold. She saw it. She knew I still wanted her in some corner of myself, and that knowledge was its own torment, because want wasn't the same as love, and she would never have love again. When I turned and left without a word, I heard the soft thud of her folding basket hitting the floor, followed by a muffled sob. I smiled to myself as I walked away. The cracks were widening, and I had only just begun to press. It started late at night, when the house had already gone quiet, and my son's breathing upstairs had settled into the steady rhythm of sleep. I was in the living room with a half-empty glass of whiskey, staring at the amber liquid, as if it could show me answers I didn't want to ask. That's when I heard her footsteps, soft, hesitant, but coming closer. She appeared in the doorway, dressed in a thin nightgown I hadn't seen in years. The fabric clung to her body in the low light, the curve of her hips visible, the swell of her breasts just barely hidden. My throat tightened despite myself. I hated that my body remembered her so well. That lust still stirred even when my mind screamed betrayal. She walked slowly toward me, her bare feet whispering against the floor. Her eyes were wide, wet, but burning with something deeper than tears. "We can't go on like this," she whispered. "Please, let me show you I'm still yours." Before I could answer, she climbed onto my lap, straddling me, her hands pressed against my chest, her lips hovering just above mine, trembling with need. The warmth of her body sank into me, awakening everything I had tried to bury. "You remember, don't you?" she breathed against my mouth. "How we used to be, how much I wanted you. I still do. I always have." Her lips found mine then, soft at first, then hungrier. Her tongue slipped against mine, familiar and desperate. I tasted salt, tears, sweat, longing, and for a heartbeat, I let it happen. My hand slid up her thighs, gripping her hips, pulling her closer. The nightgown rode up, her skin hot beneath my palms. She moaned into my mouth, arching against me, the sound sparking old memories of nights when we couldn't keep our hands off each other. For a moment, I almost forgot. I almost gave in. But then the image slammed into me. My son's pale face in the hospital, Daniel's voice in the bar, "He can't be yours." The thought of another man's seed in her body, another man's blood in my son's veins. Fury shot through me, tearing the passion apart. I gripped her hips tighter, enough to make her gasp, and pulled my mouth from hers. You think this fixes anything? I hissed. You think sex makes me forget? Her eyes widened, her breath ragged. No, I just want you back. I want us back. I shoved her off my lap, not roughly enough to hurt, but hard enough that she stumbled onto the couch beside me. She curled against the cushions, her nightgown sliding dangerously high, her chest heaving. She looked both broken and beautiful, and I hated her for it. You don't get me back, I said coldly, standing over her. You get to live with the guilt. You get to watch me raise him while you rot in shame. That's all you'll ever have now. She sobbed, reaching for me again, but I stepped out of her grasp. Her hands clawed at the air, her face twisted with desperation. Please, she cried. I'll do anything. Just don't shut me out like this. I looked down at her, sprawled on the couch in that nightgown, legs trembling, hair tangled, tears streaking her cheeks. For a second, I considered giving in, if only to punish her differently, to take her body but deny her heart. But then I realized the cruelty of withholding was sharper, deeper. I already told you, I said softly, almost tenderly, you'll never have me again. Her sob turned into a wail as I walked away, leaving her collapsed on the couch, her nightgown bunched around her thighs, her shame and desire mingling in the dark. Upstairs, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to her muffled cries drift up from below. My body still ached from the memory of her weight on my lap, the heat of her kiss. But I held on to the anger, the betrayal, the promise of revenge. Desire could be ignored, pain could be fed, and I intended to starve her both. The morning after her desperate attempt, the air in the house felt suffocating. She barely spoke as she moved around the kitchen, her hands trembling as she poured cereal into a bowl for our son. Her eyes were swollen, rimmed red, her nightgown hastily replaced by sweatpants and a t-shirt. But I could see the shame clinging to her like smoke. I, on the other hand, played the part of the perfect father. I sat at the table, smiling, joking with the boy, helping him balance the spoon when his hands shook. Every laugh that spilled from his lips felt like a nail driven into her. I could see her watching us, her eyes glistening, her mouth twitching with the words she didn't dare say. Later that day, I suggested we take him to the park. He was still on crutches, but he lit up at the idea of feeding the ducks at the pond. She agreed quickly, almost too eagerly, as if grasping at anything that resembled normalcy. At the park, I carried the picnic basket, our son hobbling proudly beside me. To anyone watching, we were the image of a strong family recovering from hardship. Parents smiled at us. Strangers nodded. Even an old couple complimented me on being such a devoted father. I thanked them warmly, my hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder. My wife stood a step behind, her smile brittle, her silence screaming. I didn't offer her my hand. I didn't meet her eyes. And when the boy laughed, throwing crumbs to ducks, I crouched beside him, whispering encouragements, while she lingered uselessly in the background. That evening, after he went to bed, she finally cracked. She cornered me in the kitchen, her voice sharp with desperation. You're punishing me. You're doing it on purpose. Don't think I don't see it. I leaned against the counter, sipping my drink. Punishing you? No, I'm just being a good father. Maybe you should try it. Her face twisted, the words striking deep. Don't you dare use him against me, she stammered. Against you? I chuckled bitterly. You did that yourself the moment you brought another man's blood into this house. Her hands shook so badly, she dropped the dish towel she'd been gripping. She bent to pick it up, but her knees buckled and she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. For a moment, I watched her, remembering the night she straddled me in desperation, offering her body like an apology. I remembered how close I'd come to giving in. But this, watching her unravel, begging for scraps of warmth, was far more satisfying. Over the next week, her paranoia grew. She followed me from room to room, asking if I was leaving her, if I was seeing someone else, if I was planning to take our son away. I gave her no answers, only silence or cold, clip replies. It drove her mad. At night, she reached for me under the sheets, her hand brushing against me, tentative, pleading. My body reacted traitorous, but I grabbed her wrist and shoved it away. No, I whispered into the dark. She turned onto her side, shaking, muffling her sobs into the pillow. And yet, when morning came, I was the picture cheer for our son, making pancakes, helping him practice walking, taking him to school when the doctor cleared him. Neighbors smiled at me. Teachers praised me. Friends commented on how strong our family looked after the accident. I let them believe it. I fed the illusion, knowing she stood beside me dying inside, unable to tell anyone the truth. One night, I caught her staring at me across the dinner table, her fork untouched, her eyes hollow. Finally, she whispered, "Do you still love him?" Truly. I set down my glass and looked her dead in the eye. More than anything. And that's why you'll suffer every day, because you know he's mine even if the blood says otherwise. Her face crumpled, and she excused herself from the table, retreating upstairs like a wounded animal. My son asked where she went, and I smiled gently, ruffling his hair. "She's just tired," I said, but the truth was simpler. She wasn't tired. She was breaking, and I was only just getting started. The house had become a stage where every movement, every glance, carried a weight heavier than words. My son laughed, played, healed. I made sure he thrived, that he felt nothing but security and joy. But behind the curtain of normal life, my wife was unraveling thread by thread. She flinched when I entered a room, watched me with wide, uncertain eyes, as if I might vanish at any moment. She hovered too close, desperate for scraps of affection, then broke into tears when I ignored her. At night, she lay beside me stiff as a corpse, her body shaking with muffled sobs. One evening, after dinner, she cornered me in the hallway. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. "We can't go on like this," she whispered. "You're killing me." I tilted my head, studying her. "No," I said quietly. "You're killing yourself. I'm just watching." Her lip trembled, her voice cracking. "I'll tell you everything. Every detail, every mistake, every moment. Maybe if you hear it all, you'll understand." And I cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Understand? What's there to understand? You spread your legs for someone else and brought me a child that isn't mine. That's all the understanding I need." Her knees buckled, and she pressed against the wall for support. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "I thought it was a mistake that would disappear. I thought if I just kept quiet, we could still be happy." "And were you?" I asked coldly, stepping closer until I could see her pupils shake. "Were you happy lying to me every day? Watching me love him? Watching me believe he was mine?" Her silence was answer enough. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing. For a moment, I felt the old instinct to reach for her, to comfort her, to say it would be all right. But I crushed it. She didn't deserve comfort. She deserved the silence, the coldness, the slow bleed of guilt. That night, she tried again. I woke to the sound of her slipping under the sheets, her hands sliding across my chest. Her breath was warm against my neck, her body pressing against mine. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw. "Take me, make me yours again." My body stirred against my will, memories rushing back of nights when her touch had been salvation. But I shoved her hand away, rolling to face her in the dark. "You're not mine," I said softly. "Not anymore." Her breath hitched, a sob tearing for her throat. She curled into herself, trembling, her shoulders shaking. I lay awake listening to her cry, the ceiling above me nothing but a blank canvas for my anger. In the days that followed, her paranoia deepened. She asked me constantly where I was going, who I was talking to, if I planned to leave. I answered with silence, or with a smile that chilled her. I wanted her to wonder, to doubt, to fear that at any moment I might walk away. Because the truth was, staying hurt her far more than leaving ever could. She began to shadow me, following me with her eyes as I played with our son, as I laughed and cooked and read bedtime stories. The boy thrived under my love, but she faded further into the background, her presence almost invisible. The more she tried to insert herself, the more obvious her absence became. One night, I caught her staring at us from the doorway as I tucked him in. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, her lips moving silently as if she was praying. When she realized I saw her, she fled down the hall, her footsteps heavy with shame. That was when I knew she was nearing the edge, and I would be there to push her over it. By the time weeks had passed, I had perfected the part one wanted the world to see. Every morning I was up early, cooking breakfast, packing lunches, tying shoelaces, laughing with my son until the kitchen rang with his joy. Neighbors smiled when they saw us leave together. Teachers praised my dedication. Friends called me an example of fatherhood. And through it all, my wife stood silently by, her eyes hollow, her mouth pressed into that strained imitation of a smile. I made sure to perform not just for the world, but for her. Every hug I gave the boy, every kiss on his head, Every whispered, "I love you." Son was a dagger she had to watch sink into her own flesh. Because she knew what I knew, that none of it should have been possible, that bloodlines had betrayed me, but I had chosen to make her mine anyway. And that choice was her prison. At home, I gave her nothing. At the table, she was invisible. At night, she was a stranger in the bed beside me, her body trembling with need I refused to satisfy. When she reached for me, I turned away. When she cried, I let her, and when she tried to start conversations, I responded with silence sharp enough to cut. But with him, I was everything. We played board games late into the night, his laughter echoing down the hall. I taught him to throw a ball in the backyard, even though his legs still wobbled. I read him stories before bed, my voice warm, my hand stroking his hair until he fell asleep. She sometimes lingered in the doorway, watching, her face twisted with envy and guilt. She wanted to be part of it, to share in the closeness. I never let her. One night, after tucking him in, I found her waiting in our bedroom. She was dressed in something delicate, silk clinging to her curves, the kind of thing that once would have undone me in seconds. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Please, let's not go on like this. I can't live without you." I studied her in silence, letting my eyes travel slowly over her body. I saw the hope flicker in her face, the way her breath hitched as if she thought, just maybe, I'd forgive her. Just maybe, I'd take her back into my arms. Then I shook my head. "You already are living without me," I said softly, "and you'll keep living that way, every day." Her face collapsed, the hope draining out like blood from a wound. She fell to her knees, clutching at my legs, begging, "I'll do anything you want. Just don't shut me out." I pulled away, stepped over her like she was nothing more than a shadow. I went downstairs, poured myself another drink, and let the silence consume me. In the days that followed, her desperation deepened. She hovered over me when I cooked, when I read to him, when I laughed with him. She inserted herself clumsily, offering to help, to join, to be part of the warmth. I shut her out every time. The boy didn't notice. He was too happy, too safe in my attention, but she noticed. That was all that mattered. At night, I sometimes woke to the sound of her crying in the bathroom, muffled behind the door. I didn't go to her. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, savoring the quiet power of it, because this was the revenge I had chosen. Not to leave, not to scream, but to stay and to love the boy with everything I had, while letting her rot in the silence. And every day it worked. Every day she withered a little more. One evening, I caught her reflection in the window as I played with him on the floor. Her face was pale, her eyes ringed dark, her body thinner than it had been weeks before. She was unraveling, and I knew, as my son laughed in my arms, that I had become exactly what I wanted to be, the perfect father, and her perfect punishment. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of day that should have been ordinary, filled with the slow rituals of family life. Breakfast together, chores, maybe a walk to the park. But ordinary had long been a stranger in this house. Every silence was too sharp, every word too heavy, every look from her tinged with guilt and desperation. The boy had just finished his cereal, sticky with syrup, when she snapped. 1 second she was smiling thinly, wiping his face with a napkin. The next her voice cracked into something raw. "I can't live like this anymore," she blurted, her eyes fixed on me across the table. I didn't answer. I sipped my coffee, deliberately slow. Her hands trembled on the napkin. "You don't talk to me. You don't look at me, you—" Her voice broke. "You treat me like I don't exist. And I can't." She stopped, choking on her own words. Our son looked between us, confused. "Mom," he asked softly. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears, then turned to him with a brittle smile. "It's fine, sweetheart. Mommy's just tired." I reached across the table and ruffled his hair, smiling warmly. "Don't worry, buddy. Everything's fine." My tone was steady calm, the opposite of her shaking voice. His eyes settled on me, reassured, and she saw it. That was when she broke further. That afternoon, she cornered me in the hallway. Her eyes were red, her hands balled into fists. "You're destroying me on purpose," she hissed. I leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed. "Am I? Or are you just watching yourself fall apart?" Her voice rose, trembling with fury. "You can't keep doing this. You can't shut me out forever. He's mine too. You can't take him away from me." I stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the heat of me, close enough to smell the faint trace of her perfume. "I don't have to take him away. You're doing that yourself. Every time he looks at me instead of you, every time he laughs with me while you stand in the corner, he's choosing, and you can't stand it." She gasped, her breath hitching, her eyes wide with the sting of truth. For a second, I saw the memory flicker in her face, the way she had once used sex to draw me back, the way she thought she could still tempt me. But that weapon was gone now. That evening, it all erupted. We were in the living room. The boy sprawled on the rug with his toys, when she suddenly blurted, "Do you want to know a secret about Daddy and me?" The words sliced the air in half. My blood ran cold, but my face stayed calm. The boy looked up, curious. I set my hand gently on his shoulder before she could say more. "Your mom's just being silly," I said lightly, smiling down at him. "Why don't you go grab your favorite book? We'll read together before bed." He nodded eagerly, scrambling to his feet, hobbling off to his room. The moment he was gone, I turned to her. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I hissed. Her face was pale, her chest heaving. "I can't stand it anymore. I can't carry this alone. He should know." I stepped closer, my voice dropping into a growl. "If you ever say one word to him, if you ever poison him with your guilt, I swear you'll regret it." Her lips trembled. "You wouldn't." "Try me?" The threat hung in the air, thick, electric. She staggered back, her hands covering her face, tears streaming. I left her there and went to read to my son, my voice calm and warm as if nothing had happened. His eyes lit up as I turned the pages, his laughter filling the room. Behind us, I could hear her muffled sobs from the hallway, and I smiled to myself, because she had reached her breaking point, and I still hadn't forgiven her. The house no longer felt like a home to her. I could see in the way she moved, shoulders slumped, eyes cast down, as if every wall carried a memory of what she had done to me, though the house had become a stage where I played the role of the man I chose to be. Father, protector, the one who carried the weight of love without forgiveness. My son flourished. His leg healed. His laughter grew louder. His confidence returned in full. He called me Dad with unshakable certainty, his hands slipping into mine without hesitation, his trust so complete it ached. Every time he smiled at me, I felt something real, something untainted by betrayal. He was mine because I decided he was, and nothing in the world could take that away. She watched it all from the edges, a shadow haunting her own family. Her guilt had devoured her. Her beauty was fading, her eyes rimmed with sleepless nights, her body growing thinner. She tried, sometimes, to smile for him, to be present, but he gravitated to me instinctively, sensing where the warmth lived. And every time he chose me, she withered a little more. Neighbors, friends, even family praised us. They said we were strong, resilient, a picture of unity after the accident. They saw my devotion, my son's joy, the neat smile she plastered onto her face when others looked. None of them saw the cracks. None of them saw her collapse into sobs behind closed doors. Only I did, and I let her drown in it. One night, long after my son was asleep, I found her in the living room with the lights off, staring at the window. Her reflection looked like a stranger's. She didn't turn when I entered, didn't speak. Finally, I said, "You're breaking." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I know." I stepped closer, poured myself a drink, and sat across from her. "And you'll keep breaking. Every day. Because I won't forgive you. Not ever." She closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I don't deserve it." "No," I said flatly. "You don't." The silence that followed was heavy, final. She knew that there was no escape, no path back to the woman she used to be. Her punishment wasn't divorce papers or screaming matches. It was life itself, lived beside me, forced to watch what she had destroyed, unable to repair it. Later, I checked on my son, asleep in his bed, his chest rising and falling peacefully. I sat on the edge of the mattress, brushed his hair back, and felt my chest tighten with something fierce and protective. "You'll never know," I whispered. "You'll never know what she did. You'll never feel it, because I'll make sure of that." The next morning, we waited for the bus together. He held my hand, swinging it back and forth, his laughter carrying in the crisp air. My wife stood behind us, her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes hollow as she watched. When the bus came, he hugged me tightly before climbing aboard. He waved from the window, his smile wide. I waved back, pride swelling in my chest. She stepped closer then, her voice breaking. "You're everything to him." I turned to her slowly, letting the silence sting. "Yes," I said, "I am." Her lips trembled, her eyes filling, but I didn't offer her anything more. I walked back into the house, leaving her standing alone in the morning light. That was the truth of it. I had chosen to stay, not out of love for her, but out of love for him. And by staying, I had built a perfect revenge. I would love my son fiercely, endlessly, while she rotted in silence. She would never escape the weight of her betrayal, never reclaim the man she lost. Every smile, every laugh, every "I love you," Dad would remind her of what she destroyed. That was her sentence. And it was forever.